Let's talk 观点好钱. Today we have this great honor to welcome Mr. William Stanton, the former director of the American Institute in Taiwan, to join us on the program. Mr. Stanton has had an extensive career in U.S. diplomacy, holding several important positions. After retiring, he chose to stay in Taiwan, which gives him a special perspective on the evolving dynamics between Taiwan and the U.S. Welcome, Mr. Stanton. Welcome, Bill. So happy to have you with us.
Thank you so much.
Speaking of the special perspective, in Taiwan, the major news this week is definitely shaken not only the semiconductor industry, but also general public in Taiwan about the TSMC's investment, $100 billion, of building a plant in the U.S. What's your take on this further on U.S.-Taiwan relationship development?
Yeah, well, I know it's shaken the confidence of a lot of Taiwanese people who thought this is a real blow to Taiwan's sovereignty. But I'm not an expert on the semiconductor business, but I mentioned when we were talking a little bit earlier about the tabletop exercise I participated in, and there were several business people from the semiconductor business here in Taiwan, and they were much more upbeat about it.
Really?
Yeah, they said, you have to recognize a couple of things. One is TSMC's biggest customer is in the United States. This was a statistic this expert gave, 60 to 70% of TSMC's business is with the US. And second of all, that something like 70% of the owners of shares in the stock of TSMC are also American investors. So in a certain sense, the relationship is already very close. Of course, Taiwan was under threat of sanctions.
Yes.
And I regret that because I think, even without a threat, it's quite possible. I think it's likely that TSMC, because of the close relationship already as customers and also as investors with the U.S., Taiwan, TSMC would have seen it in its own interest in order to come to an arrangement like that. There's another factor that I think the business people tend to think long term, and within 4 years, the length of President Trump's term, by then TSMC won't have completely finished the new plants, the new facilities are being built in the United States. So companies always have to look to the future in terms of their customers, their sources of investment. And finally, as another expert said the other day, there's something that in terms of semiconductors, U.S. doesn't have. One is culture, and the other, the culture that produces semiconductor chips, but the other is the talent. Mm-hmm. So I've already seen in the newspaper today that the most advanced chip production is going to remain in Taiwan in any case. So all of these factors taken together, and then considering that the people who run TSMC are really smart, I think the decision was probably a wise one. So although everybody's regretting it and seems to think it's bad news for Taiwan, it may be good news.
That's a very interesting perspective, actually.
Yeah.
Because a lot of people that I heard talking about this, they all feel very depressed. They feel like Taiwan's losing their strategic value. There are major strategic values no longer ours. Do you agree with that?
I don't think so. Again, I think that Taiwan for the foreseeable future, and I think for the rest of the Trump term for sure, I think Taiwan's going to remain the world's leader in semiconductor industry. And so I feel very upbeat if you exclude other factors about Taiwan's future. I don't think that this one sale or, buy-in or whatever you want to call it, this investment that Taiwan Semiconductor is going to make $100 billion. I don't think that's going to be a major turning point for the industry or for TSMC.
Can you say it's a win-win situation?
I think so. I don't think I have a lot of confidence. I mean, I used to know Jiang Zhou when he was in charge. And that's my last time I talked directly to anyone in TSMC. When I was teaching at in Hsinchu, Qingda, I used to occasionally have a dinner with him. And, the people that were left in place, I think they're really smart. And I don't think they would have gone with this deal if it didn't make a lot of sense for them from different perspectives. So I think Taiwanese public in general should have more confidence in what TSMC is doing. It's unfortunate that it all has the aura of, how would I put it, of a forced purchase or a forced business venture that somebody's being thuggish. But anyway, I think it's probably the right decision. And avoids the alternative of tariffs, which that's another factor which in any case we see now is backfiring again in the United States. The news today is all reporting that, the companies themselves in the United States are saying the tariffs are killing them, business is going elsewhere. It's very problematic if you impose, and this is what economists all along have been saying to the U.S. government. I mean, every time tariffs have been raised in the last, the past year, ever since Trump was elected, they've all said that tariffs are not good for an economy. So I think that's proving to be true. And so what happens is twice now Trump has imposed tariffs and then he's backed off on them. And so it hasn't been a steady policy, but rather more like a threat and then a realization that it's not working that well in U.S. interests.
Yeah. I think what you just mentioned about the aura of force, it's very significant to Taiwanese people, especially because just before the TSMC news came out, the day before was everyone's talking about the huge fight in the White House with Trump and Zelensky.
Yeah.
And Taiwanese people watching that has a special feeling because Taiwanese people are afraid that Taiwan might be facing the same situation as Ukraine. And then the second day, the TSMC news came out. So the timing is very sensitive, and it's very hard for people not to relate to things.
Sure.
And do you think Ukraine and Taiwan have similar situations?
Well, only in the sense that, Trump has an idea that somehow, as he once said, Taiwan stole our technology, Taiwan is indebted to us, Taiwan should pay us for our defense. He's made a number of remarks that have not been, positive about Taiwan, and also, in my own view, are certainly not true. Positive, the one thing I would probably agree with is that many countries that have depended on the alliance with the United States have perhaps not done enough on their own to build their own defense network and relied too much about the U.S. coming in and supposedly saving the day. So, that might be a positive outcome in the long term, particularly during the course of this administration. But meanwhile, it's done a lot of damage to the sense of the alliance that we're all together in this. And it's really brightened the outlook of the countries we're most worried about China, Russia, North Korea, and Iran. Countries that, support aggression, support in the case of Iran, terrorism. It's a very difficult situation now, strategically, internationally. But so I understand and I share some Taiwan concerns about the situation. But I think, Taiwan is also doing things that I think are positive. I myself have taken the view for many years now that Taiwan needs to do more for self-defense, and Taiwan needs more to build up its military, not only its personnel, but also training of those people. So that seems to be a standard view. When I've talked to U.S. military officers, they've talked about that at length, that what Taiwan has done is good, but it's not enough. Not because Taiwan plans to fund a war, and in fact, the conclusion, I guess, of the tabletop exercise I was in is, you don't fight wars, you know you can't win.
Right. Speaking of enough, I think lead me back to the White House. What happened between Trump and Zelensky? We saw that J.D. Vance kept on repeating, "You're not thankful. You're not showing how thankful you are," and Trump being supporting of what he said, and also Trump also strengthening the point of that you have no cards.
Yeah, I think both of those sentences are inane. You have no cards. I mean, it's not a card game. It's
right.
What's at stake is the freedom and democracy of a people who don't feel they're part of Russia, that Russia wants to take over. So I think that kind of shorthand is, you don't have any cards, particularly because President Trump wants to take away what cards you have.
Isn't that similar to Taiwan? Current situation that's fighting for democracy, and will we one day be asked the similar questions? That's what the general public in Taiwan is very frightened of.
That's one of the reasons that I've advocated in any case that Taiwan should do more for its own self-defense. I went to a Catholic school, a high school. God helps those who help themselves. I think, I don't mean to be religious, but I
understand the concept.
The context.
You have to help yourself first before people can help you.
Well, yeah, I think Taiwan can do more, but I think it's up to Taiwan. President Lai Ching-te has said that Taiwan needs to do more. It was in the front page of the Taipei Times a couple of days ago, or yesterday, forget. And I agree with that. For one thing, it just gives Taiwanese people a greater sense of security. But also with the increasingly aggressive moves around and the increasingly aggressive rhetoric that's being used by Beijing, I think it gives Taiwan a reason to say, yeah, it wouldn't be a bad idea for us to bulk up a little bit. Now, I've heard the phrase 10% of your GDP thrown around.
Right.
I wouldn't buy into that. It's up to Taiwan to decide, given what its other responsibilities are, and it knows its own economic situation the best, and what's available in terms of taxes and so forth. But I certainly think that, there should be some increase probably, but that's up to Taiwan to decide that. So while the Taiwanese people are uneasy, and I understand why, and at the same time, there are other factors that lead me to be a little bit more optimistic. For example, I was very encouraged that 3 of the leading foreign policy figures in the U.S. government are pro-Taiwan. Mario Rubio, the Secretary of State, who totally supported what Trump and J.D. Vance had said, but I took that as self-survival. But he has spoken out repeatedly on the importance of Taiwan, not only because it's a free democracy, but also because it's part of the third island chain. It's geostrategically important. We also heard from Mike Waltz, who's going to be the National Security Advisor, or already is. And we've heard from his deputy, Alex Wang, whose sister is second-generation Taiwanese. They've also spoken out on the importance of Taiwan. And Taiwan is a model democracy. I mean, Taiwan went from dictatorship to democracy in a very short period of time. And it also went from being a poor place to being prosperous, beyond anything anyone could have imagined. And that was through the talents and the skills of the Taiwanese people themselves. It's one of the reasons I admire Taiwan so much. So, I mean, there's some good news out there as well. And I think people sometimes forget the good news. I think by and large, the American people they know a lot more about Taiwan and the good news of Taiwan than they know about Ukraine. I think Ukraine, unfortunately, for a lot of people, that used to be part of Russia, and they still think of it that way, perhaps. Taiwanese people should be proud of what they've accomplished, and there's no reason why they can't accomplish more. So I would say, look on the bright side of things, and continue to work hard, and continue to achieve as you have in the past. You've got great skills, great talents. You've created a great culture. Go with it.
Well, thank you so much, Phil, for joining us today and sharing with us your expertise.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.